You're with Jess Ong
Now we're talking.
on ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory.
As we've been talking about this afternoon, the decision to drop your kids off or to put your child into childcare isn't an easy one. And when you do drop them off of a morning, you hope and hope and hope with all of your heart that they are going to have an incredible day full of fun and love and warmth and time with their friends and have the time of their life like they would be having with you if they were in your care. But unfortunately, that isn't always the case, as was revealed on ABC's Four Corners episode last night. You can catch up with that on ABC iView if you didn't catch it last night. But it's not just at childcare where things can go wrong, where shocking incidents can happen, where things can be overlooked, where people can take advantage of your child in a vulnerable situation. It can also happen at school, at your friends' houses as well. That's an unfortunate reality. It can happen in sporting clubs, swimming clubs, can happen in a lot of places. So who do you trust with your kids, or who can you trust with your kids? It's an important question, but also a really confronting one. So how do you talk to your children about body safety, what to look out for, all of those things? Christy McKeevy is a former child abuse detective and now child abuse educator and founder of CAPE AU. Hi, Christy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a big question, Christy, but who can you trust your kids with? Who do you sort of trust your kids with in this world that's ever-changing and full of lots of different people all the time interacting with your kids?
Yeah, look, I think it's really hard. Obviously, being an ex-child abuse detective, I saw the worst of the worst. And it can seem like everyone is out to harm your children. But, what we need to keep mindful of is that, there's a lot of people that are there to be safe people and to, help our children, but we've got to be mindful of the behaviours that they're displaying. One in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused by the time they reach 18 years old. Over 90% of the people who abuse those children will be someone known to them. So it's not the stranger danger that we really, although that's important, but, that creepy man in a white van or that person giving out lollies, they're not the people we actually need to be on the lookout for. And that's in research and in my experience as a child abuse detective investigating this stuff.
So the way that we talk to our kids about what to look out for, it isn't really that narrative of stranger danger anymore.
No, not so, because strangers can be safe people as well. It's more about looking out for tricky behaviours and, behaviours that might set off alarm bells. It's talking about things like if someone makes you feel unsafe or safe and unsafe behaviours. It's allowing our kids to know that they have the right to feel safe at all times and always, if anyone, adult or child, makes them feel unsafe, that they need to come and tell someone.
Christy, let's talk as well about body safety. That's kind of what all of this is about. How, as a parent, do you broach this subject of body safety with kids? What is it exactly?
Yeah, so body safety, or the body safety rules, are basically everyone has the right to feel safe at all times, and you can talk with someone about anything. And these body safety rules sort of came around about the same time as stranger danger, funny enough, in the 80s, because we saw a lot of kids who weren't disclosing any abuse because they didn't know that, first of all, that they had the rights to feel safe, and also that they could tell someone about it because, as you can imagine, these things are done behind closed doors. You alluded to the fact that sometimes it's not even that stranger that they need to worry about. It's that family member or that person, that coach or someone that is known to them. So body safety is about teaching our children a set of rules and a set of guidelines about first of all, how to identify when they feel unsafe. So we can talk to our children about early warning signs, which is what's it feel like in our bodies when we feel unsafe. And you can talk and teach this to your children as young as, 1 or 2 years old. When my daughter, when I first started learning about this stuff, when I first became a police officer, she was only 2 years old. So I started talking to her about, what does it feel like when you feel unsafe? Or what does it feel like when you feel safe? And being able to identify, when I feel unsafe, I get butterflies, or I get, a headache, or your knees feel shake. And when they have that language, they are able to tell someone when they don't feel safe.
It's a fine line, isn't it? In some ways, you're really mindful of putting words into your kid's mouth as well. I know with the tiny boss number 1, she's almost 5. And sometimes when she's, feeling a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious and she doesn't quite have the language to tell me exactly how she's feeling. And so I want to kind of broach it with her and give her the space to have that conversation. But I also don't want to put words into her mouth, because then I know that she'll just hold on to those because they're the things that I've said. So how do you kind of balance that out to know what the right language is to use for a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an evolving process. You start off with very simple language when they're little, and I can understand where you're coming from. You know, at 5, you don't want to give them the language that means that they don't want to do anything. But we can also then explain differences in, you know, when we feel scared to go to do something scary versus when we do something that is going to be fun, like it's fun to be scared. You know, going down a big slide, or, you know, trying the monkey bars for the first time. You know, you have that evolving conversation. That might not be something you discuss initially, but it's something that you'll discuss as they get older. So it evolves with their obviously their development. But, you know, when we teach body safety, we're talking to them about who do they feel safe with? Who do they want to, you know, if something happens, who can you talk to about that? And we're talking about things like what makes you feel safe, and also, you know, no, you know, we need to model consent and no. So if our children say no to being hugged or, you know, maybe being tickled, then as adults and parents around our children, we need to also respect when they say no, things like that.
It's 3 on 105.7 ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. My name's Jess Ong. I'm having a chat to Christy McVie, who's a former child abuse detective. She's now the child abuse educator and founder of Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia, talking about body safety, having those conversations with your children. I wonder whether it's something you've had a conversation with your kid. How did you broach it? What language did you use? Was it a hard conversation for you to have? I'd love to know some of your experiences. If you're wanting to share them this afternoon, give me a call on 1300 057 222. Christy, I guess the other thing as well, like when we're, you know, zooming in on the language used, is just the importance of referring to your body in the right terminology, like using the right correct terms for your genitals, for example, as opposed to, you know, some of that more flowery language that might avoid calling things what they actually are.
Yeah, 100%. In talking to children and interviewing children. So I was a specialist child interviewer for 9 years in interviewing children who had been abused. You know, the children that were able to, you know, clearly describe what happened and described the body parts, those children were also more likely to speak up because they knew exactly what was happening and that it wasn't safe, it wasn't appropriate, versus, you know, the children who had that pet names had been used for their private parts. It's really important we use anatomical correct names because in my experience as well, it actually deters abuse by someone who wants to harm children. So anatomical correct names, you know, identifying public versus private. Public is for everyone, private is just for me, and private parts are just for the child, that they're their private parts, you know, and having those conversations around that to set the boundaries and the guidelines so that our children know. Because, you know, with anything, anyone, if we don't know, how can we tell someone if it's not right?
And I think it also does push adults into maybe an uncomfortable position as well, where, you know, they might be of a generation where we weren't using or they weren't using anatomically correct terms for their genitals. And so therefore, you know, adults really need to step into a bit of an uncomfortable space as well in order to support their children or grandchildren.
Yeah, 100%. And if we have, and what I've seen is the more open and honest we have these conversations and we discuss this with our children from a young age, it doesn't have to be embarrassing and it doesn't have to have that taboo and shame around it. The younger we start these conversations, the more open we are, the less likelihood of a child being abused. Or if something happens, the quicker they are to speak up. And it's so important. And that's why, you know, as a police officer, I didn't have the opportunity to prevent abuse then, but now educating families and parents about this stuff, I have that opportunity, and that's why I do what I do.
Jess Ong with you this afternoon on 105.7 ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. You're hearing from Christy McVie. She's a former child abuse detective, now a child abuse educator and founder of Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia. 3, talking about body safety, body autonomy, how to talk to your kids about consent and keeping themselves safe in situations that they might find themselves in. Had a call from Carl in Tiwi. G'day, Carl.
Hello, Jess.
What's your experience been?
My old lady was, among many other things, was a sexual health educator, and she was a part of founding the world's first society for the prevention of cruelty, child abuse, basically.
Wow.
Called Expand back in '84, along with several other great people. And I was 9, my sister was 4, and I remember the conversation around, you know, body safety and all that sort of stuff.
What did she talk about? How did she talk about it with you and your sister?
Basically, just being very open. These are your private. These are your private bits, naming them, of course. And if anybody ever touches them, you need to tell someone. And and being aware of it, and also stranger danger and that sort of stuff coming out at that same period.
How did that make you feel as a 9-year-old? Did it make you feel a little bit sort of embarrassed or a bit strange to be having those conversations with your mum, or it was just the way that she broached it made it feel very normal?
Certainly the way she broached it. Plus, we're a fairly open sort of household, so there was no real sort of issue with it. It was just having another conversation, and there was no embarrassment or anything like that. It was just having a conversation about it.
Your mum sounds like a bit of a superstar.
I remember one of the jingles that they used to have. That went along with this sort of first educational sort of program.
Are you going to sing it?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. My body's nobody's body but mine. You've got your own body. Let me have mine.
That's great.
Excuse my child voice.
I think you did a good job there. But I mean, Carl, that shows, the power of a jingle, the fact that all of these years on, you remember that and it stayed with you.
Yeah, I mean, my sister's gone on to have kids and I've had the conversation with her about, have you had that conversation with them? And she's like, yeah, 100% straight up. I fear you. So that's been passed on as well. Because, there's just no fear and no embarrassment around it. It's just a possibility and be aware of it.
Yeah.
If something happens, then, yeah.
You know what to do. So good to hear your thoughts. Thank you, Carl, for giving me a call. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Jess.
That's Carl in Tiwi on 1300 057 222. Christy, is that one thing that we need more of as well? Like the jingle that you just heard Carl recall from his memory in his childlike voice. Like, is that something that we need more of in terms of just being able to educate children in a way that's accessible? Do things like that exist anymore, or have they kind of dropped off?
No, we've got so many resources out there. There's so many great books around body safety, around just personal safety in general, and that children have the right to feel safe. So there's lots and lots of books that we can read with our little toddlers all the way up to adult, teenagehood. So, there's multiple things that we can do. There is some jingles out there. I'm not going to sing them for you, but there is stuff out there. It's just about being open to it. And I think one of the hard things for me as an educator is a lot of parents will say, well, it's not happening in my community. It's not important. Like I don't think people realize how prevalent it is. It is 1 in 4 children. In fact, recent research recent as last year found that 28.5% of Australians walking around were sexually abused as children. So, we can't think that it's not going to happen to our families, and we can't think that it's not going to happen to our neighbours or the people around us. It happens. And the thing is if it's predictable, it's preventable. If we know that it's happening, then we can do something about it. And that starts with body safety education and just being protective parents.
Christy, before I let you go, I mean, with everything that you've seen and experienced in your career, like, how do you still have faith in the goodness of people after what you've seen? It just must be incredibly confronting to have to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I think because of speaking to kids and hearing, they are just so resilient. And speaking to victim survivors, a lot of us can handle a lot of things. So kids are amazing. They're very resilient. When they go through this, most of the time they just want to feel safe again. And this mission is too big not to protect our kids and to keep working in the way that I'm doing this in the community. It's just too big a mission.
Well, thanks for sharing some of your insight this afternoon. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
That's Christy McVie, who's a child safety expert and educator, former child abuse detective and now a child abuse educator and founder of Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia, talking about body safety, the importance of having those conversations with your kids and with your grandkids. There is a child protection reporting line if you need to contact someone. It's 1-800-700-250. That's 1-800-700-250. You can also go online via Care Services, which is careservices.nt.gov.au.